Absolute value equations are another equation that you will be asked to solve. It's very important to understand that in an absolute value equation, the absolute value of x, all that is describing the distance from 0 on the number line. And notice you can have a positive, it can be in a positive direction on the number line, or it could be a negative direction in the number line. So when you are rewriting your absolute value equations without the absolute value bars, you need to make sure that you have that equivalence down. So if you have the absolute value of u is equal to c, you need to write two equations. U is equal to positive c for that positive direction, and that u is equal to the negative c for the negative direction. And this is very important to make sure that before you do this step, you make sure that your absolute value is completely isolated before you do that. All right, so let's do some examples. All right, first one is the absolute value of 2x minus 1 equals 5. So we're going to write this absolute value. Notice the absolute value is already isolated. So we are going to write our two equations. So the first equation is the positive direction. So 2x minus 1 equals 5. And then we also have the negative direction. So 2x minus 1 is equal to negative 5. So both of those things need to happen, because it could be a positive direction, it could be a negative direction. So this is an or statement, in case you're wondering. All right, and then you're just going to solve each of those individually. So I'd add 1 to both sides here. I get 2x equals 6, and then I can finish that off by dividing both sides by 2, and I get x equals 3. So there's my first solution, x equals 3. And I'm going to do the same thing with the second equation. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. I get 2x equals negative 4. I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to isolate that x, and I get x equals negative 2. So I have two answers. So I have a set of, there's my flower brackets, and my answers are negative 2, comma 3. So notice you put them in order from least to greatest when you write that in set notation. All right, let's try another one. All right, here's my next equation. Notice this time that the absolute value is not isolated. So that's the first thing I need to do. So I'm going to subtract the 6 from both sides, because I need that absolute value of x plus 1 to be completely isolated. All right, and then I have the absolute value of x plus 1 equals negative 4. Now, you could finish the question right now and not move on for any farther, because you can never have an absolute value of a number equal to a negative. Absolute value is distance. Distance is always positive. So when you get to this point right here, you could stop and you could just say distance is never positive. Distance is never negative, sorry, is never negative. So this problem will have no solution. Now, if you didn't catch that right away, then you could go through and you could solve the two equations, right? So I'm going to do that in green, where I didn't catch this equal to a negative number. So I do x plus 1 equals negative 4, and x plus 1 equals positive 4. I would solve each of those. I get x equals negative 5. Solve this one, you get x equals 3. And then you'd have to check those answers, right? Because you should always be checking your answers just to make sure you got them right. And when you plug them back in, it wouldn't work. If I plug in negative 5 here, I get negative 5 plus 1, which is negative 4. The absolute value of negative 4 plus 6 is not 2. So that one fails. And then you would do it again with 3. 3 plus 1 is positive 4, so this would be a positive 4. Well, the absolute value of 4 plus 6 is also not 2. So notice both of them fail, so I would also get no solution. Again, in words, if you wanted to write it in symbolically, you would use your null set symbol. So just even if you miss it, when you check your work, you should find out that it doesn't work. The problem is a lot of students don't check their work, so please make sure that you're always checking your answers. All right, what do you do if you have an inequality that has an inequality on both sides? Now, if that happens, you treat it just like you would any other inequality symbol. So, right, so we've isolated our 2x minus 7, that absolute value. So 2x minus 7 is going to be equal to the positive, right? So the positive of this stuff, x plus 3, or the 2x minus 7 is going to be equal to the negative of that stuff, x plus 3. So even if there's two absolute values like this where they're equal to each other, you still solve it the same way. All right, so let's solve this first equation on the left. All right, so the parentheses I don't need, right? That's just, so I'm just going to cross that out and put x plus 3. All right, so I need to solve that. I have variables on both sides. So I'm going to move the smaller variable. So I get x minus 7 equals 3. And then I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And I get x equals 10. So there's my first answer, which of course you would check because we're all good students. All right, and then I would go to the other side. This I need to distribute that negative sign. So distribute my negative sign, and then I'm going to get all the x's on one side. So I'm going to get rid of that negative x because that's the smallest one. And that gives me 3x minus 7 equals negative 3. Then I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And I get 3x equals 4. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And I get x equals 4/3. And then I would check that to make sure it works because I'm a good student. So both of them work when I check them. So that's my answer, 4/3, comma, 10. I have two solutions. It could happen that maybe one of them doesn't work and one does. That's always a possibility. Doesn't happen very often, but it is possible. So just make sure that you're keeping track of all the details and making sure that you're checking your work as you go. All right, here's another example where we have absolute values on both sides. Again, solve it the same way. So this absolute value is already isolated. So x squared minus 15 is going to be equal to the positive of 2x, or x squared minus 15 is going to be equal to the negative of 2x. So I'm going to notice that both of these are quadratic, which means I need to get everything on one side. So x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. And then on this side, x squared plus 2x minus 15 equals 0. And then you would solve each of those quadratic equations however you see fit. Both of these will factor, so I would solve it by factoring because that will be a little bit faster. So this will be x minus 5 and x plus 3 equals 0. And if I factor the other side, that would be x minus 3 times x plus 0. So be very careful with those signs because I know a lot of bad things could happen. All right, and then each of these. So this quadratic would give me two answers. It would give me an answer of positive 5 and an answer of negative 3. And then this solution, let me put that x equals. And then over here, these two factors would give me solutions of 3 and negative 5. So that's what my x would equal over there. So I would check all of these to make sure they work. It turns out every single one of them works. So my solution set is going to have 4 answers. It's going to be negative 5, negative 3, positive 3, and positive 5. So again, just make sure you're checking these to make sure that they are that everything works, and you should be all right. All right, so please make sure you come back next time when we talk about absolute value inequalities.